When you're pregnant, some of the baby's DNA or whatever is going to be in your blood. So they can do this draw and then figure out, I guess, I don't know what all they test for, but Down syndrome is one thing that they can flag on the test. I had that blood draw done, and then that blood draw came back as abnormal.
That trigger like more tests than
yes. And then he's like, we recommend some other tests. We recommend that you go see this genetic counselor. Basically, after all was said and done, the likelihood that Abel will be born with Down syndrome, they told us was like 40%. And so
that's way lower than I thought you were going to say. So when you say the genetic counselor, is that someone that looks at all of the results and then kind of explains to you like what you're looking at?
Yes. For us, like, we never considered terminating the pregnancy. He still brought it up multiple times.
Wow.
Like to the point where like
far along at 28 weeks.
Yeah. Then Chris told the genetic counselor that after she brought it up like third time, like if you want to terminate pregnancy. And he was like, well, actually, like we had talked about adopting a baby with Down syndrome before this happened. And she was just like, I still remember the way she said it. And she was like, really?
In your experience, do you think that there is a nefarious agenda?
Oh, yeah.
Ready or not, we will get going. So thanks for doing this, friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on.
Me too.
It's been well, I think I told you a little bit. I haven't told you like really probably the full story. It was just kind of in text that you made one comment to me several years ago that always stuck with me. And you may not even remember the comment, but it was we were going back and forth on something controversial, surprise, right?
Yeah.
But we were having good discourse on it.
Sure.
Kind of like how we have typically have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, you said that something along the lines of, and I think I wrote the quote down somewhere, but you'd said somewhat along the lines of that you really respected or enjoyed my my opinion on it, and that I had a perspective that people needed to hear. And that last little part, like, just always stuck with me, because at first I was like, oh, that was really sweet, but I don't really believe that. Like, I don't believe anybody wants to know what my perspective is. And but it always stuck with me. And because typically you and I probably disagree on probably most things on a like surface level, maybe, like on the root of the issues, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the times we're really like this, and then like there's just like, but you like maybe start over here and then we're on track, right? So that's the reason why it always stuck with me, because it came from someone that we don't typically agree with on things.
Right.
And so I just wanted to share that little tidbit with you.
I love that. That's good.
That had a lot to do with why I even decided to start the channel.
Well, that's really cool.
Really why I do a podcast at all was just that little, and there was other family members and stuff that were pushing me too, but that comment always stuck with me. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad.
And I do want to clear up one thing though. Like I said, I don't even know that you even remember what I'm actually referring to, but I have a I guess some might call him a troll. He kind of just pops up every once in a while. I don't even really know if he is an actual troll for me. I haven't worked it out yet with him.
Yeah.
To see if he's a troll. I'm actually going to have him on. I don't get the impression that he actually watches, but he does want to come on. So I'm going to have him on eventually, and maybe I'll get to the root of if he is actually my troll or not. But when I made the announcement on Facebook that I was launching the channel, he kind of popped out of nowhere, like he does sometimes with some of my posts. And he said, so this is, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, okay? But you got to be honest.
Okay.
So he said, nah, she doesn't value. That's what it was. I think you said you value my opinion, maybe. And he said, no, she doesn't actually value what you have to say. She was just being polite.
Does this person know me, like that they can speak for me? Because that's not true.
No.
Oh no, then I would just ignore it.
Well, I did, and we kind of went back and forth because I thought it was hilarious. Because that's why I thought it was funny. I'm like, dude, you have no idea who I'm even talking about. You're just making all of these assumptions. So anyways, So I just wanted to, I was like, hey, I've got her face to face. I'm gonna
No,
have
I
to
wasn't
ask
just
her.
being polite. I don't really say things just to be polite. You probably know that. So
All right, there you go,
no,
Alex.
I
I don't
mean
know if
it.
you watch
So
these things, but it's straight from her. So there you
yeah.
go. He probably still won't believe you. He'll probably still find a way to troll that comment maybe, but I
So
don't know.
interesting. And you don't know who he is. So if you have him on here, you'll see him for the first time if he'll go on video.
Yeah, so this is so it's an interesting dynamic with him.
Mm-hmm.
He friended me on Facebook. I know his brother. We have a common denominator.
Okay.
His brother at one point was kind of part-time of our media at church.
Mm-hmm.
And so he friended me on Facebook, and I saw the connection. I was like, oh, okay, like obviously they're related, like,
Yeah.
cool. So I accepted his friend request, and then all of a sudden he just like randomly would just pop up on a post or something and just say what other people would say are like trolling comments, because he's a pretty, I don't know, staunch atheist, I guess is maybe how I can describe him. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Describe himself when I have him on, but uh and so we one time and I never get, I mean, you know how I am. I'm pretty measured, I feel like, all the time on social media now.
Yeah.
And I don't get really triggered, and so I kind of thought I just had fun with him every once in a while. I would dance with him a little bit here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and so then he would like send me private messages and stuff. So we really only have this internet relationship that's only occasional, like literally 6 months on that I won't hear from him, and then all of a sudden he pops out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
and then we were supposed to go get lunch one time. Because I told him in one of my replies back and forth, because I don't like to go too far. Like, I'll draw a line eventually on Facebook comments, because I'm just like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, I don't know, I just don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, listen, I said, if you want, one time I said, if you want to talk about this stuff more, I'd be happy to meet you for lunch, and let's sit down and talk about it face to face. And then a few months go by, and all of a sudden he's like, you invited me to lunch one time, I want to take you up on it. All right, cool, let's do it. And then it didn't end up happening. And so yeah, I've never actually spoken to him face to face. So I'm thinking it's going to
That's
happen
interesting.
soon.
That's
So,
really interesting. Well, good for you for reaching out the olive branch. That's
yeah.
yeah.
Do you
I
have any
used to do
trolls?
stuff like that. You know what? I think I have like trolls that I actually know. Like, but I think I've started to notice in recent years, like with Facebook and things like that, I pay really close attention to friends of mine who only comment on things when they want to kind of, when it's controversial, I guess. Like I've had a couple, well, I mean, someone who I'm no longer friends with. And kind of a big part of that was I started to notice, like, anytime I would post something like good that happened to me or about my kids, it was like there were never any comments or support on that. It was just maybe the time, I would post something that was a little controversial. That's the only time they'd pop up.
Hmm.
And I was like, I get it. Like we can have different opinions and things like that, but like you need to be here for my wins too.
Yeah.
Not just don't just come around to argue with me. So
Yeah. I
I
can see
think
that.
but no anonymous trolls though. That's pretty interesting. But honestly, the reason, and I know we're probably gonna like, I don't know if we're gonna talk about this necessarily, but that's part of the reason I've never started a social media for Abel,
Mm,
because I don't have the bandwidth to deal with it. I have way
mm,
too many friends that have these wonderful Instagrams, and I do realize that like the majority is good. Like they may have 1 million followers, and then there's always those people
there's
who just
always
say
some. Yeah.
the most terrible things about their children, and
Yeah.
I like to think I have really thick skin when it comes to myself. So
Yeah.
like if it was just a channel about me or something and someone said something rude about me or my parents, I wouldn't care. But my kids, it's a little bit different. And so people have told me 1 million times, like, you should do a social media or do something about him. And I'm like, I just can't. I would get myself into trouble somehow. I don't know how, but I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't let it go. Just some of the things. So any of my friends that do that, I do really have so much respect for them, because it does take a lot of thick skin and resilience to do
For
something like
sure.
that.
Well, and it's 100% the truth. And because I when you put yourself out there, really, and that was one thing that I had to settle too when I was going to start the channel and announce the channel.
Mhm.
I had to settle within myself that I'm asking people to judge me.
Yeah.
Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I'm putting it out there and I'm asking people to judge me. Like
True.
I don't know if asking is the right way, but
Inviting.
inviting, maybe that's a
Yeah.
better one. Yeah. I'm
Mhm.
inviting
Yeah.
people to judge
Mhm.
me. And
Yeah.
so I had to be okay with people judging me incorrectly, I guess, or
Mhm.
not just disagreeing with me. It wasn't even about disagreeing with me. I'm
Yeah.
okay with disagreement. I can
Mhm.
handle that discourse. It was
Yeah.
more I had to be okay with that mean spirited judgment. Like, oh, Joel's voice is so annoying, or oh, his the way he moves his hands around is so annoying. Just like like the petty
Yeah.
stuff.
Nothing
Um,
constructive. Yeah.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So I can imagine that feeling some pressure, especially with with your own children for one, but
Right.
also with a child that's that has challenges and things like that you guys are
Yeah.
challenges that you're going through. So uh,
Mhm.
I will say that some of my favorite social media kind of follows though are in the Down syndrome community.
Oh.
um they there's these two Australian dudes that
Mhm.
do like cooking shows. Have you
Yeah.
seen them?
Mm-mm.
They're hilarious, and like the people that help them do it, like cut them the reels and stuff really well too. And
Yeah.
let me see if I can find them.
Yeah, you'll have to send it to me, and I'd love to check it out because.
Oh yeah, they got a story right here actually. All right, let me try sharing this. Let's see if this
Oh,
works.
cool.
Share screen, Instagram, share. All right, right here. Can you hear it? Oh wait.
Hungry. Yeah. Karate. Woo! I think it's too much alcohol.
So um so anyways, those guys are like hilarious.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, get down with I lost the page here. Let me get back to it. Get down with Sean and Marley.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
check that
and they
out.
do cooking shows and stuff. And then there's another one that pops up in my feed all the time that's hilarious. I think too because he's like a huge wrestling fan.
Uh-huh.
Is let's see, his name is let me see here. Derek Baker.
I don't think I've heard of him either.
Oh, it says you follow him actually.
Oh, well, I follow a lot of people on Instagram, so I probably do. If I see him, I'll probably recognize him.
Yeah. All right, let me try sharing this. That one, share.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd
He's
crack up at this
awesome.
all the time. And now Sean and Marley and Derek, they're adults now, right? So that's a whole different
That's their choice.
dynamic,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this one was cracking me. I was showing Candace this one.
Rough for us. Derek was not pleased when I made him take the stairs to breakfast. It got worse.
I'm an elevator person, which my wife and I were like, yeah, we are too.
I'm also an elevator person. Yeah, totally. That's so funny.
So, anyways, I get what you're saying for sure. Totally
Mm-hmm.
understand being hesitant about that, with it being given his age. And how old is Abel now?
6 today.
Sick. Oh, that's right. You said today's his birthday. Oh
Yes,
my
today's
goodness.
his
Happy
birthday.
birthday, Abel.
Yep, we're gonna
Awesome. Do you guys have
little.
birthday plans today?
Oh, we kept asking what he wants for his birthday, and he says cake. So I mean, we've got some cakes baking, and just gonna open a bunch of presents and have his favorite food. So
Awesome. Hey,
yeah,
cake. That's easy.
yeah, yeah. So, and he's kind of hard to buy for, but I think we did pretty good.
Yeah,
So,
that's exciting. That'll be
yeah,
fun. Does
yeah,
now how does your daughter Ella, right?
yeah.
How old is she now?
She's 7, and
7.
she'll be 8 in October.
Okay. So how does the sibling do with, how do each of them do, I guess, with sibling birthdays?
Oh, great. Like she wanted to go out shopping for him and stuff. She gets really
Okay. That's
excited. And
awesome. Yeah.
I mean, we usually do get like the other, like I know like yesterday, like when she went shopping for him, like she got a couple things herself. I
Yeah.
always usually try to get them like each little gift on the other's birthday, especially because like I know Abel doesn't totally understand, and he gets so
Right. Yeah.
excited. Like if anyone comes over, like Josh came over, my brother the other week, and it was his birthday, and Abel was like opening his presents for him.
Yeah.
So, and Josh was nice enough to let him do that. But yeah, so but he definitely knows it's his birthday today because we've been kind of pumping him up for it. So
Build it up. Yeah. Hyping
yeah,
it up. That's awesome.
yeah.
That's cool. So what, all right. So I guess, we've already been talking a little bit about him, and
Mhm.
I guess we should probably because I know obviously some of your story and some of
Yeah.
your history. So, so the reason that we're talking about, Abel, and pulled up some of those Instagram people that I check out, is because Abel was diagnosed with. Can you officially? Do you have like an official diagnosis?
Oh yeah. So, well, I mean, his primary diagnosis, I would say, is Down syndrome, and then he has like a few, I guess, what I would call resulting conditions that we've gone through or still going through. But that is his primary diagnosis. And then he also has another extremely rare genetic variance, which at this point doesn't really seem to be affecting him. But interestingly enough, that one is hereditary. So that means either Chris or I is a carrier, but we don't know who.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Is there any kind of explanation as to like why people are born with Down syndrome?
Well, so my understanding of it is that it happens at conception. So, I mean, the moment the baby is conceived, it's going to happen because there's an extra copy of the 21st chromosome, which is why sometimes you see like 321 or trisomy 21. So, yeah, that's it. He just has an extra copy of that chromosome. And then because of that, there are certain, and of course, I'm not a geneticist, this is just like very surface level, but because of that genetic variation, that can cause an underexpression or an overexpression in some of his genes, which is why you sometimes hear a lot of people say that, which I don't necessarily agree with, but like all people with Down syndrome look alike. I understand what they're saying is that there are similarities
Similar
in like
features,
physical features, and that's what causes that too. So, but yeah, I think he looks a lot like me, but yeah, he definitely has, some features common to Down syndrome too, and it's because of the overexpression or underexpression of those genes.
I gotcha. Now, is that something that is there any information, or have they discovered any links with people like is that something that's in your genes that then was just expressed like in yours or Chris's genes that just came out and expressed at conception, or is it just a random thing that can happen with anybody?
My understanding is it's totally random. Now, I will back up and say that there are 3 types of Down syndrome. There's trisomy 21, which is the most common, and then there's translocation, which I think accounts for maybe 3 to 4%. That does have some kind of like hereditary properties, I think, and it's a lot more complicated the way that happens. And then there's mosaic Down syndrome, which means that only some of the cells have the extra copy of the 21st chromosome, but they all don't. So sometimes you might see there are certain people who are they have mosaic Down syndrome, so they might not have like all the features of someone with Down syndrome. They may not have as many delays, or they may. Because I know when Abel was born, they thought that he may have mosaic Down syndrome, and that was just based on his appearance, because there are a few features that are pretty common to Down syndrome that he doesn't have. And so they did test him for mosaic, and then he just came back with just regular trisomy 21. But so to answer your question, I think translocation Down syndrome can have some more like there's like something like hereditary there possibly, but that's the only one. Other than that, it's like totally random. And I want to say it's like, I think it's the most common genetic condition because it's like one in every like high 600s birth. So pretty common considering like, his other genetic variants that he has coupled with Down syndrome is pretty much like 1 in a million. So I mean, it's like really, so he's got pretty, I guess like Down syndrome is like the highest odds you can have for a genetic condition, for if you have a child who's going to have a genetic condition. So
I gotcha. So there's not like, if you and Chris decided to have more children, it's not that those pregnancies would be any higher risk.
I don't think so. No. I mean, we won't have any more kids just because like my age. But yeah, I would definitely, though, that would never stop me or anything like that. So
I gotcha.
yeah, I don't think there's any more or less likely that I know of.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it'd be pretty rare for people to have 2 biological children with Down syndrome. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I really don't see that a lot unless it's twins. So
interesting.
Yeah.
How is Chris from Lebanon? How did you guys meet?
No, he's not from Lebanon. He's from like out, I guess, what would that be? East, like towards like Bethel area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's like out there. Bethel is.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny the way we met because so this was back in, I guess, 2015. A friend of mine at work had downloaded Tinder, and I was not on Tinder. And she's like, you got to download this or whatever. And I was like, okay. So I downloaded it. And another friend of mine at work she didn't want to put it on her phone, but she was using my phone. But she kept swiping on all these guys that like were not my type at all. So I was like, I'm going to get all these messages. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like maybe they were into things like I'm not into. Like,
sure, yeah.
She's really into working out. I'm not. So like she's swiping on guys that say they want a workout buddy. Well, that's not me. So then I was like, I'm going to get all these messages from these guys that I'm not even like going to be compatible with. So then I took my phone and I was swiping and I saw Chris and I said, that's a guy that's my type. And I swiped on him. So he was actually my first swipe. Nice. And, then I didn't really think anything else of it. And then we matched. And it was funny because he knows this, but like I almost canceled because we were supposed to meet and I was like, do I really want to like do this? Like, I don't know this person. Like, it's like, what if he just like, for something like, what if he doesn't like me? And I'm like, you know what? If he doesn't like me, then okay. So then, yeah, we met, we hung out, and then he messaged me the next day and was like, do you want to hang out again tonight? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So, and then after that, we were pretty much, inseparable. So
that's cool. That's a cool story. A Tinder story. I think that's my first in-person Tinder story that I've heard of before. So
yeah.
A little Tinder testimony.
Yeah.
That's cool. And on the first swipe too, like that's efficient. Like
well, it was really funny the way it happened because I was just like, oh my gosh. And then of course, I was having to like I did end up getting a lot of messages that I was having to like refer to my friend, like, I'll give you her number. She's the one who swiped on you. So yeah.
That's funny. Chris made it though.
Yes.
That's cool. And then I guess the rest of that is history. So then you guys got married and started having babies pretty quick then, if that was 2015. And
yep.
Then Ella's, you said, about to be 8.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Let's see where. Okay. So then, all right. So then you find out that how was your pregnancy with Ella? Was there any complications that you're comfortable talking with, obviously, but
oh no, it was good. I mean, the only thing with her was that like towards the end, my blood pressure it had been perfect the whole time, and then it went up to like I think like 140 over 70 something.
Yeah.
And so then they said if they couldn't get it under control, that they would induce me. And so then we went in, and then so I ended up having her at 37 weeks exactly.
Okay.
But it's interesting because with her, I was not of advanced maternal age. as I was going to be with Abel.
Yeah.
So when I was
Which is
pregnant
like
with
what,
her,
35 or something, I think they determined that.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I was 32 when I got pregnant with Ella, but I was they base it on when you're actually going to give birth to the baby. So I was 32 when I got pregnant, but I was 33 when giving birth. And Abel, I was 34 when pregnant, but then for almost all the time, but then 35 when I give birth. So I was considered advanced maternal age with him, which is kind of how all the testing took place. But I will say there was a scan when I was pregnant with Ella, and I think it's done around 13 weeks, and it's called like the nuchal translucency scan.
Uh-huh.
And it can detect like some markers for Down syndrome.
Okay.
And I think it measures some fluid like in the back of the brain or something.
Yeah, I'm
And
trying to
so,
remember if that sounds familiar, because I was at almost all the appointments with Candace too, so I remember a lot of that.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with what you're talking about there.
Yeah, so they asked me if I wanted to do it with Ella, and at first I said no because I was like, well, I mean, like if it's like testing for Down syndrome, like it's not going to like change the outcome of anything, so like why bother? But
Right.
then I was talking with Chris about it, and I said, well, supposing she did have Down syndrome or something, like we probably just like I'm very like type A, like I like to be prepared, and that just gives me comfort. So I was like, I mean, although it wouldn't change an outcome, like, so I called literally in the 11th hour because it has to be done within that window. Because if it goes too long, they really can't do the test. That's my understanding. So I called and I said, actually, do you want to do it? So they like rushed me at the last minute to do it. And I had been talking with my friend who was also pregnant, and her sister-in-law is a nurse or something. So they don't tell you the results as they're doing it, obviously, but she had told me the numbers to look for on the screen. And if it was within that certain threshold, then she was like, okay, then that means that the marker wouldn't be there, So I remember looking at the screen and I saw that it was under whatever threshold. And I thought, okay, well, I mean, she probably doesn't have Down syndrome. And then sure enough, that she did not have Down syndrome, and she wasn't flagged as any kind of like risk.
Yeah.
So then when it came to Abel's pregnancy, they told me that since I was of advanced maternal age, I should do this test called Natera. And what really sold me was that they told me that we could find out if he was going to be a boy or girl.
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
Really early. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, like sign me up. That sounds great. Well, we did that test and it ended up coming back inconclusive. So, which really isn't, that can happen sometimes for a number of reasons. And so then there was some kind of issue with like where it was really hard with like insurance, like going round and round with them, and they billed my insurance like $8,000. So I had a
For the
pretty
test?
Yes, and it was only supposed to be like 200 something out of pocket. And so then I was just like really
$8,000 for one test?
Yeah. So then I was really I had such a bad taste in my mouth because I had to like go through all these hoops to like resolve it with my insurance.
Oh
So I was like,
goodness.
I'm just not messing with this test anymore. Like they asked me if I wanted to redo it and I said no. And so then there was another test around like 20 something weeks, and that was a blood draw. And I remember I had that done. And what that test does, if I remember correctly, so it tests my blood. But then when you're pregnant, and again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm just kind of repeating what I was told. But when you're pregnant, some of the baby's DNA or whatever is going to be in your blood. So they can do this draw and then figure out, I guess, I don't know what all they test for, but Down syndrome is one thing that they can flag on the test. Because if I don't have Down syndrome, but then his DNA is in my blood showing that he does, then clearly, I guess he probably, I guess they think there's a good enough reason to believe he does. But there are other things that can cause that test to come back like abnormal, like something with like your placenta. I don't even know. So anyway, I had that blood draw done, and then that blood draw came back as abnormal. And so then I remember.
Would that trigger like more tests than?
Yes. And I remember when they called me, well, I actually called them, because before they would always just kind of call and say like, oh, everything's fine. And I was like, okay. Well, then I knew I was waiting on a phone call from them and it never came. And so I thought they should have called me by now on that test. So I called the nurse's office, which I had done before a few times. And they were like, well, the doctor's going to have to call you back. And I thought, okay, that's kind of weird. And so then one of the doctors called me, and I can't even remember. I remember I was pulled over in like the Target parking lot, and he told me that basically the test came back and it was abnormal, and there was a risk for Down syndrome, which I didn't really, I mean, I obviously knew what Down syndrome was, but I didn't like actually know anybody personally that I was close to like with it. So I didn't really know that much about it other than like my surface, knowledge, which was very limited. And so then he's like, we recommend some other tests, blah, blah, blah. We recommend that you go see this genetic counselor. And so it was just a lot, because I went from kind of like, expecting like, I guess nobody really expects anything to come back. And then when it does, it's like kind of, throws you for a loop. So I think I was more scared because I somehow knew that people with Down syndrome can be higher risk for heart conditions. And that really scared me. And so then I was thinking like, oh gosh, because like I don't think the cognitive delays never, I don't know if I ever even like thought about that or worried about that. It was all just more like, could he have like some, life-threatening condition as a secondary result of this. So that really stressed me out. And so then
is that just because is there some sort of connection with the genetic abnormality, I guess, of it that then leads to those risks, I guess?
There has to be, because it's a very high percentage. I mean, I've read it can be I know at least 50% of people with Down syndrome have this very common health condition. But with I can't remember exactly what the heart condition is, but it's one of the more simple heart conditions to correct. I do know that.
Oh, okay.
But kind of lost my lighting there.
The light switched off.
Yeah, my lights are going a little bit crazy. Yeah, give me a second here. I'll fix it. So anyway, it has to be something like that, I guess, because it's far too common for it not to be. So then that kind of led us down the path of, now we have to go see a genetic counselor, and that's where, the additional tests and such would be ordered. And that was an experience, the genetic counselor. But and that's how we would end up having get referrals to all the additional testing, which one of those additional tests they wanted me to do was they wanted me to redo the Natera test, the blood draw, and the one that was $8,000. So I did it again. And when we did that test again, it did come back with a very high probability for Down syndrome.
Now, is that what the test? Oh, there's a fly. Is that what the test gives? Is a probability? Like, is it literally like this percentage?
It is like a probability. I think there's a lot of confusion about what the results, like how to actually read them. And I used to know so much more about it, but it is a very convoluted kind of equation, I guess you could say. But basically, after all was said and done, the likelihood that Abel will be born with Down syndrome, they told us, was like 40%. And so
that's way lower than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, and that was like a whole bunch of different things they took into consideration, because also he didn't have a lot of the classic markers. So for example, a lot of times the babies won't have a very present nose bridge. He had that. I'm trying to think what else. He didn't have the extra fluid behind his neck. No, he did not have a heart condition. He doesn't have a heart condition. So there were a lot of, like, if I hadn't had this Natera test and these additional tests, which you can obviously decline any of these tests I had. Any test
Sure.
I had that ended up giving a high probability for Down syndrome was completely elective. So they would not have found this on any of the scans. Because typically Down syndrome is diagnosed around 20 weeks because of the scans anyways. Just because they'll find the heart condition or something else. And so without this, we would have had absolutely no idea. It would never would have been detected on any other kind of scan. So
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions from people asking me if they think that they should do the tests or if they should not do the tests. And it's so hard because I feel like for me, it was better because I was able to prepare myself.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's going to stress someone out or, or
Yeah.
if it's not going to change the outcome, which we didn't definitively know. Because when we went to go see the genetic counselor, which I was not a huge fan of any of that interaction that took place.
Yeah. So when you say the genetic counselor, is that someone that looks at all of the results and then kind of explains to you like what you're looking at?
Yes. And it was just a very negative experience. And I could see how somebody who didn't have the support that I did could be really like badly affected by the approach that this woman had. It was just very awkward. And, she just kind of like, well, first of all, she pulled out a binder with photos of people with Down syndrome. So it was really strange because it was like, well, I mean, yeah, I know what people with Down syndrome look like. Like, they're not like, the Yeti. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I need to, I don't really need, it was just, and then she kind of like went through all the issues and she kind of, even like suggested that he would have a heart condition, even though by that point, because this was pretty late. I mean, this was like, I was 28 weeks along at this point. It was pretty
28 weeks, is that what you said?
28 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was pretty like definitive that he wasn't going to have a heart condition because we had already had, a couple different, appointments with cardiology and had determined that. So, but she kind of still brought it up as if it was still, going to happen. And, then despite us, because for us, like, we never considered terminating the pregnancy. It was just never like in our head. We never thought to do that. So she still brought it up, multiple times.
Wow.
Like to the point where like
far along at 28 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're very limited to where you can go. Like, I think she said we'd have to, like, at that time, go to, like, maybe Chicago would have been the closest place or something. But it was like, well, we didn't ask. And, like, then even after I said, well, we're not interested in that, it's not something that we, like, had even, like, thought about doing. And she still brought it up, like, 2 more times. To the point where Chris reached down, like squeezed my knee under the table because he knows me too well and he could tell I was about to be like, ma'am, stop. And so, but it was funny because, and this is the honest to God truth. So I didn't mention any of this, but so in between Ella and Abel, we got pregnant with another baby. And we ended up losing that baby. It was about 12 weeks. And at the time, like, we just didn't know after that loss, like, am I going to be able to have any other kids? Because I did have to end up like, I guess, I did have to end up like terminating that pregnancy. It was an ectopic pregnancy. It was causing me to bleed to death. So
that's where it like attaches like inside the fallopian tube rather than the uterus, right?
Yes.
Right,
and so so as a part of that, I ended up losing the tube that the baby was in too. And so we didn't really know, like, I mean, you can still get pregnant, obviously, but we didn't really know, like, okay, is this going to make it harder? I am getting older. So Chris and I mean, I still remember exactly where we were. We were talking about this and we were looking at like adoption sites and things. And we saw that there were like overwhelming amounts of kids with disabilities who need to be adopted.
Wow.
And a lot of the kids had Down syndrome. And I'm like, wow, like, that's like, we could totally do that. Like, we could totally adopt a baby with Down syndrome. That would be, that would be really great. And we definitely talked about it. Well, then Chris told the genetic counselor that after she brought it up for like the third time, like, if you want to terminate the pregnancy. And he was like, well, actually, like, we had talked about adopting a baby with Down syndrome before this happened. And she was just like, I still remember the way she said it. And she was like, really? And I was like, maybe this isn't the job for you.
Right. Yeah.
Be doing this, but I mean, maybe it is the job for her, because it seemed like she kind of like had a bit of an agenda there, unfortunately.
Right. Well, that's kind of a question that I was going to ask you was, in your experience, do you think that there is a nefarious agenda?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do think so. And I say that as, I mean,
yeah, I know,
I am a pro-choice person. I am, but what I'm not is people making decisions based on fear or lack of information.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a lot of what happens. And this is just like, I've talked to so many different parents, who've had a diagnosis. I really enjoy doing it. I think it brings me a lot of joy. I really appreciate the people who talked to me when we had our diagnosis. And, it's overwhelming, the amount of people that, I mean, I've even heard people say like, it's just assumed that they're going to have a termination. Like, people have called, the doctor's office has called, like, when should we schedule this?
Wow.
So now my doctor, my actual OBGYN, was nothing like that. I mean, she was extremely supportive. This was just like the genetic counselor that we, had the bad experience with. But my doctor, nothing like that. She was absolutely wonderful. Very encouraging, didn't ever even suggest anything like that. So, but unfortunately, I guess some people's OBs even kind of go down that road.
Wow.
So.
Which, the whole thing, and we might get into a little bit of it, but as we continue on with your story, but there's just a lot of nuances like that deserve to be talked about. And
True.
And there's, and both sides are guilty of wanting, both political sides now, right? If we look at the political aspect of that, that issue, is that both sides are so strongly wanting to push whatever agenda they have, that there's all these things in between that get left out of the conversation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, where for me, I'm what probably you would describe as the pro-life side. Now, sometimes I don't even know that I want to be associated with the pro-life side, because of how sometimes there's the message is there's not always the pro-life message I'm not always with, other than I'm for life.
Sure.
Okay. So, yeah. But I understand that there are these nuances that we have to sort out, and we have to talk about those things. And the problem is we can't even get to a place of agreement. It's just, so much about this side, and it's about, you just want to control women's bodies. And then this is like on the really far side of this is like, there are
no exceptions.
There's extreme versions of it. Right. So I do get frustrated by that rhetoric, because there is this truth about it, and then stuff like this gets hidden, right? Because the left side, they don't want this kind of story to be told, and they don't want it to be told that there is nefarious agendas behind, you throw out the word eugenics, right? I think that's the right word. And and it's like, oh, that's just alt-right conspiracy stuff, and it's like, wait a minute, no, this is real. Like
it definitely happens. I mean, I'm pretty much a fire-breathing liberal, and I can tell you it happens. I mean, happened to me. And I will say, like, and I know, and I understand what you mean when you say you don't want to be associated with like certain when it goes too far, right? Because like an interesting thing that happened to me,
like just to give you one example real quick, is just like, well, they should keep their legs closed if they don't want to have a baby. Like I'm not going to not have compassion towards women regardless of the decisions that they make. Like, so
Yeah.
I'm not on board with that message. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's really a good example.
No, totally. I mean, that's something that, yeah, I could never see you saying anything like that. And, you know, when I had the second pregnancy that we had, you know, obviously that is not what I wanted to do. I didn't really feel like I had a choice. It was just kind of like, this is what's happening to you. This is how we have to save your life. And that it was a very traumatic experience because what ended up happening, and I don't mind going into some detail here. So I was, you know, obviously Ella was still a little baby. She was like 6 months old. And I did not know that I was pregnant with the second baby because my body hadn't like reset itself, we'll say. So I didn't really even know. I mean, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I didn't really, being pregnant really wasn't something I thought was going to happen yet. And so then when I started to have some complications, Chris actually told me, like, this doesn't really seem normal. Like, you need to go to the doctor. And the first thing they asked me was, could you be pregnant? And I was like, well, I mean, I guess. I mean, I don't know. And so then when we got there, they gave me just a regular pregnancy test and it was positive. And so I was like, oh, okay, wow. So like I was optimistic. I was cautiously optimistic because I also knew the things that were going on were not good because like you shouldn't be like, you know, I don't want to get graphic or anything, but I was having some issues like hemorrhaging and things like that. Yeah. So I knew that I was like, oh, this probably isn't good. Like I probably need to kind of prepare myself for anything here. Am I miscarrying? And so then when we get into the room, they ended up like running the I forget what it's called. Like they had the wand and they ran it over my stomach. And anyway, I heard the heartbeat.
Yeah.
And so then I thought, but it was so quick because, and I knew it so well because, you know, I had just been pregnant and just gone through all this. So it was so fast. I think I heard like 2 or 3 little heartbeats. And so then I look over at Chris, but she pulled it away really fast. And so I thought, why did she do that? And then when I said to Chris as she walked out, I was like, did you hear that? And he's like, well, no. And I said, that was the heartbeat. And I was like, so this might not actually be as bad as we think. Like, baby might actually be okay. Yeah. And he was like, oh, that's good. And I was like, yeah. So then, but nobody came in to give me any good news. And so then he had stepped outside to make a call. And I remember I had been there for like, I mean, a few hours at this point and still hadn't heard anything definitive. And I think they were waiting for the doctor to come in and give me the news is what it was. And so a nurse came in and she was like, oh, how you doing? And I mean, I had been okay up until that point, but then I started to cry and I said, and she's like, what's wrong? And I said, I just have a feeling I'm not going to get good news. And then she started crying. And then I knew. And I knew. And then sure enough, it was not good news. And it was like, they explained to me, like, you know, the baby's in your tube. We did detect a heartbeat, but your tube basically should have already exploded. Oh, wow. So, and when it does, like that could cause, that's why all this is happening to you because it's about to. And then if it does, then you're at risk for, you know, X, Y, and Z. There's like no way to save the pregnancy at this point. So,
did you have to, was that like emergency surgery then? Like at that point, like,
oh yeah, they were like wheeling me down the hallway, having me sign papers.
Like not even time to process or anything. It's just, no, this is happening.
None. And I remember waking up after it was over and I was just, and you know, it's funny because like I'm not a big crier unless it's to do with my kids, then I'm like a major crier. Yeah. And I remember waking up and just like tears just like pouring out of my eyes. And the anesthesiologist was there to check on me. And I guess he thought I was in pain. And he's like, are you okay? Like, does something hurt? And I remember I said, I'm just sad. And so then it was really tough. I mean, I felt, even though there was nothing I could have done differently, I felt so guilty. I felt so horrible about it. And this is like, you know, again, as a pro-choice person, that doesn't mean that's what I choose for me.
Right.
You know? So I just felt, you know, so down. And it was, you know, the emotional recovery was like, gosh, so much harder than the physical recovery. Cause like physically I was okay, you know, in a few days, but emotionally it took a much greater toll. And then that to say, so I work downtown. I work at a different place now, but I worked right on the square at the time. And so there's a lot of different like protests and things that go on down at the square. So the day I got back to work, there was a pro-life protest where people like pulled out all the stops with like the bloody dolls and the pictures of the bloody fetuses, and they had like 5-year-olds out there holding them. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, like, you're hitting the wrong target here. Yeah. Like, it's like, it's not going to hurt somebody who's like staunch in their belief that that's that's okay, but it might hurt somebody like me who just went through this. So yeah, I just think that my time personally is better served trying to educate people and not shame them for being scared or being just, I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. I mean, I was totally uneducated about it. Yeah. And so I just try to like share our lives and the positive side of it. And I do think it's made an impact, because I've had a couple of friends who've reached out to me privately and have told me, prior to hearing your story and prior to getting to learn more about Abel and your family, if we had a Down syndrome diagnosis, we definitely would have terminated, and now we would not. So well, some of that's pretty good.
yeah, no, absolutely, that's awesome. And I think that's exactly what you said too about using your time in a different I don't know if more positive way is the right way, because I get what you're saying in those that type of protest, where there's a part of me that's like, well, there is some reality to what they're showing, but but at the same time, it's like the presentation maybe is not.
Yeah, like is there some more positive way we can, because like I said, it's hard. I mean, I am a pro-choice person in a very pro-life space. Yeah. The Down syndrome community is at large a very pro-life space.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because a lot of people were encouraged to terminate, and it left a really bad taste in their mouth.
Right. Well, and it's almost like the community's literally under attack. I mean, I would think that that's kind of like the feeling that maybe people in that community have.
Well, what I will say is that I've always felt this way, and this is about any type of disability. This is certainly not just about Down syndrome, but I feel like of all the marginalized groups, people with disabilities are always the ones who are kind of expected to take it on the chin. And what I mean by that is, if someone says like the R word or something, like it's just like, it's kind of like people brush it off like, oh, well, they're not talking about your kid. It's the context. And it's like, no, it's just a rude thing to say. Like, you shouldn't say inflammatory things about any group. So why is it this group that's expected to just be understanding, when you say these things? And, you can't, I mean, there was, this is why it's so hard again, like on social media, there was a child, he ended up passing away, but he had some type of very rare condition. And for some reason, it was a troll. Some person made a YouTube channel just dedicated to like just saying the most terrible things about this child and like celebrating this child's death and making fun of him. Wow. And you wouldn't believe it. When I tell you, Joel, I did everything I could to try to get this taken off of YouTube. I mean, I got so many people to help report it with me. I did everything I could, and they just said didn't violate the terms and conditions.
Wow.
Take it off. And and I mean, I guess, we could go down the road of free speech and all that, which, but that's, to me, that's, I don't know, that should not be anything that's protected in my mind. Right or wrong, that's how I feel. But, again, just expected to take it on the chin, because if someone was posting something, about just about any other marginalized group that was that inflammatory would be taken down immediately.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just kind of like they're much like still struggling to catch up, or like jokes are more easily passed off if they're about people with disabilities. This is just what I see and what I hear in my daily life.
Yeah.
You know, and I've even had to check myself on saying things like that I realize are really insensitive that you might not think of at face value. Like if someone can't hear you or something and you say like, oh, what are you, deaf? Like, think about it. Like, no, I shouldn't be saying that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, or what are you, blind if they can't see anything? I will not say things like that. And I admit that in the past, I'm sure I did, but I just really try to be, you know, it's totally free to just adjust a few things about like the way you speak and the things you say, and to be just a little more conscientious of people's feelings.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I guess, you know, then people will kind of go down the road of like, oh, everybody's just so sensitive. And I mean, yeah, maybe I am. But I just think if I can just make those little changes and modifications,
Yeah.
it just goes a long way.
Well,
But,
I think there's somewhere in the middle. There's somewhere in the middle to where, yes, there are people that, you know, like people shouldn't have to always walk on eggshells, right? But you're right that there is, if people would just be a little bit more considerate, you know, would probably be okay. But there are people that probably react sometimes to things, and it could be an overreaction. Like it could be seen as an overreaction to something.
Sure.
And you know, I try not to, and I try to be somewhere in that middle where I'm considerate, but also understand that sometimes words have can be used for their real definition, you know, and sometimes society takes something and they turn it into something new that it originally wasn't. And you know, so you know, I don't want to try to purposely you know, get you going on the R word, but like there is like a real definition for it.
Sure.
And there's also a definition that has to do with just like preventing fire.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like but I get that that's like maybe not the use of the word that you're talking about either, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I can give you an example. So like Chris and I were on vacation with some family members, and someone that the family member was brought along, just, you know, someone there, they kept saying the word. And, you know, Chris just finally said, like, you know, can you please stop saying that? Like, that's not something we say around our kids. He was calling people that. And, you know, he got, you know, all up in arms about like, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to change who I am. It's like, you know, at that point, you know what I say, Joel, like, fine, you know, but I'm allowed to have boundaries.
Yeah.
So if you're not willing, I'm telling you what I need for you to continue to be around me and my family. So if you're not going to do that, that's okay. But just know that we're going to remove ourselves from that situation.
Yeah.
So, and that's really all you can do, right? And I mean, we actually did end up having to tell Ella about that word because I did not want her to hear somebody use it and then think it was okay to use it. So, you know, we explained it to her. She hadn't heard the word before. I said it. I told her what it was. And I told her, you know, that sometimes people say it in a derogatory way. And it really upset her. I mean, you know, she got tears in her eyes and she's like, why would anybody say that? Or why would anybody ever call him that? And I'm like, well, nobody ever has. But, you know, I just don't want you to hear, you know, if you have somebody at school who says it, you know, I just don't want you to repeat it and think that that's something, because that's not a word that we want to use. And, you know, she understood, but I was pretty happy she hadn't heard it. So that was good. And I do feel like people are more conscious about not trying to use that word. And I have friends who they pretty regularly did. And then when I had Abel, I noticed they stopped, at least around me. Or if they did, they'd apologize. And, you know, I'm with you, Joel. I understand that intent matters. I mean, I remember I had a friend who said it around me, like obviously not talking about anybody. They were just meaning that something was silly or they didn't agree with it. And then he was like, oh, I'm really sorry. And I said, it's okay. And I said, I know that you were not talking about, and I said, but I appreciate, just that you acknowledged it. That goes a long way for me too. Cause I'm also not going to like, I'm going to be very careful about how I respond in all those situations. Let me just say that, because I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're not in a comfortable space to talk to me about things, or a comfortable space to ask questions, because we should all be able to ask questions. And I mean, like, whenever people have, their kids or something, sometimes little kids can have questions or say like, why does he look that way? Or, we don't even really get questions about Abel's looks, to be honest. It's more questions about like, oh, why is he having a hard time walking? Because like one of the secondary conditions I mentioned to you it has caused him to have surgeries on his legs, and we're trying to resolve all of that. And so that's a lot of the questions I think kids notice, is that like, oh, he seems to be having a hard time walking, or why can't he talk, or why can't he can talk, but why can't I understand everything that he's saying? Those are some questions. And, I don't mind those questions. I invite them, and I think that they're important.
Yeah.
And I would encourage parents to not, like, if your child does ask questions about someone with disability, like my personal take is just like, don't pull them away or tell them to be quiet, or, whatever else, because like, then you kind of run to the complete opposite issue, which is just like people getting ignored. And I don't want people to ignore Abel.
Yeah.
So, I just, so yeah, I mean, I would say questions are fine.
Good. Yeah, I think my kids are pretty good too about being curious, and I think that we've done pretty well in keeping that door open for dialogue for them, and knowing that they can ask questions. And now we may there may be times where we're like, hey, it's okay to be curious, but let's not point and stare and be like, what is going, because it's just their kid reaction, right? And sometimes we don't even have it with we had one time Stevie, this wasn't even about somebody with disabilities, because we've talked about, I think we've talked about like smoking before, and and like the negative things about that. And and we're like walking right by this lady, and Stevie's like, Dad, that lady is smoking. And I'm like, chill, Stevie. Like, yes, I know. I see she's allowed to if she wants to. It's a free country where she's outside. Like, chill out. We don't have to yell at her. And she's an adult. She can make a choice. So it was like, there's times like that, I guess, that come up. But for the most part, I think that we've allowed them to have dialogue, but also pointed out just a few things about politeness, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a really great thing one time, and it was just like a talking point for your kids. Like, if someone can fix it in like 20 seconds or less, it's okay to bring up. So like, if they have something stuck in their teeth, okay, well, I can get it out. If, you're, I don't know, any, if you have something, a smudge on your face, like, okay, I can wipe it off. Now, if they're in a wheelchair, can I fix that in 20 seconds? No, probably not good to say something about it. You know what I mean? Do you have a bad haircut, or what they deem a bad haircut? They can't fix that in 20 seconds. So don't say anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, I've always told Ella, I've gone so far as to tell Ella, we do not comment on other people's appearances unless we're saying something nice. And she's very good about that, to the point of where she compliments just about everyone she meets about something about themselves. But, so yeah, I just,
that's pretty, I can see that. I think that's a pretty good way of explaining it.
Yeah.
Riker, actually there was a recent thing with Riker, and I didn't really know. I don't know. I could get your take on it, because I thought he did okay, really, for being 9. He was at a baseball tryout, and one of the boys that was at the tryout with him, I didn't see him, so I don't know exactly what he was saying, but there was something going on with his skin, like he was losing, like maybe that pigment thing, where and so it's like his skin maybe looked patchy or something like that. And Riker was curious about what was going on with him. And so they're standing in the line. This is Riker telling me the story afterwards. They're standing in the line, waiting for their turn or whatever to go.
Mhm.
And Riker told me this is what he said. That he
Mhm.
goes, "Hey, like I'm not trying to be rude, but why does your skin look like that?" And the
Mhm.
boy said, "Oh, I don't know. I was born with it." And Riker was like, "Oh, okay." And then they just went back to baseball.
That's pretty much how it goes. I will say, it's probably. I wonder if it's vitiligo. It probably is. Where there's like, like they might have like darker skin, and then like lighter skin, and like
Yeah,
patches. But yeah, that is pretty much how it goes. I mean, like, our neighbors, they're great, and their kids are the same age as ours. And I remember like they had some questions because to them, I think Abel, because Abel's very big and tall. You've seen him. He's
yeah.
over 4 feet tall now. Um, and he's just a big dude, but he's
Well,
still
Chris
very
is
much
tall. Chris is
looks like
pretty
a
tall,
baby.
right?
What's that?
Chris is pretty tall though, right? Is
He's
that
like 6'6". Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I was
Hmm.
gonna say, yeah, Chris is tall, so
And Ella's tall. I'm the only one who's not. So, yeah, he looks like a big baby
yeah,
because his face is very youthful looking, I think.
yeah,
And he is still wearing diapers. Not that kids would necessarily see that, but our neighbors' kids did see that he was wearing a diaper, and so they were like, at the time I think he was 4, and they're like, well, I thought you said he was 4. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but he's not talking and he's wearing a diaper, like, why is that? And then we just explained, like, he has Down syndrome, and they were just like, oh, okay. And it was just, it was like never an issue.
right, yeah,
So I think a lot of times, like, our kids mirror the way that we view things. So
yeah,
it's always important to know that they're always watching.
yeah.
Because I remember, now this predates me ever having any kids. A good friend of my mom's has a medical condition that's like pretty visible. You can't miss it. And I remember we went out to dinner, and it was for her birthday, actually, for my mom's friend's birthday. And there was a mom and her teenage daughter. And I saw them keep looking at my mom's friend and like kind of pointing and laughing at her.
Mm,
And I just remember thinking, like, wow, like, I didn't want to say anything because normally I would, but I didn't want to like cause a scene and embarrass my mom's friend and ruin
right,
her night because she was having such a good time and she had
yeah,
no idea. She couldn't see it happening. Um, and so I was just thinking, like, wow, that's how you're raising your kid, lady.
right, yeah.
That's
And
not,
that's not curiosity either, that's
no, that's just laughing and being really nasty. And,
right,
I mean, it's just, and that same friend of my mom's, like, I mean, just some of the things that people have like come up and said to her, it really boggles your mind. It goes way beyond curiosity, like, just really terrible things. And, um, I don't know. I'm a really sensitive person about the things I say to people.
yeah,
I I'm not so sensitive about what people will say to me necessarily, which is really interesting because given how sensitive I am to others, you'd think I'd be very sensitive, but I'm just not.
yeah.
I don't know.
My
Just
my thing is not that I try to cater to everyone. Like, I don't
mhm.
think that's the right outlook to it because
Mhm.
there is this constant, like, "Oh, I don't wanna say the wrong thing," and so
Well,
I
you
don't.
can never relax then.
Right, and so I
Yeah.
don't have that approach. My approach is always just, what is the compassionate way? Like, what is me
Yeah.
showing compassion towards the person?
Yeah.
Because I'm always trying to look at people the way, I mean, that I'm a Christian, obviously, and so I'm always trying to look at people the way that Jesus would look at them, and
Yeah.
I wanna interact with them the way that Jesus would interact with them, and, so I don't ascribe to the whatever people wanna call it, of trying to cater to people and trying to cater to everyone's feelings. It's not that.
Mhm.
It's just that there are times when we could probably just show each other more compassion towards each other,
Yeah.
without, being like, "Oh, you just, don't wanna hurt feelings."
Well, and let me ask you this. So, I mean, this is kind of like really, I guess maybe in some ways veering off topic, but um, do you feel like there are people in the Christian community who are giving Christians a bad name because of ways they're
Well, I
approaching
mean,
things, or do
yeah,
you feel that?
yeah. I mean, I mean, honestly, it's that way with every people group,
Sure. Oh, no, I
right?
agree.
I mean, it's like, uh, there's probably every political group, there's always going to be disagreement in areas just because
Mhm.
we all are people, and we all are, there's so many nuances about us that are imperfect. And so yeah, so there's definitely a lot of Christians that make the mission of Christianity more difficult.
So what would you say to somebody that you saw engaging in behavior that way, like that kind of behavior?
Um, like if I knew them personally,
Yeah, like if you were going to give them advice, like you could tell that some of the things that they were doing or saying were not really spreading the message.
I mean, I would probably, as a pastor, I'd probably, want to point towards like scripture of how,
Hmm.
to where it's not that because sometimes we get into this thing where we start to argue just semantics,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, like that gets us off topic, like,
Hmm. Yeah.
he said to love your neighbor as I have loved you. That was a new commandment that he said, I give you a new commandment,
Hmm.
love one another as I have loved you.
Hmm.
And so that was a new commandment to the love your neighbor as yourself.
Hmm.
And so in keeping with that, and you bring that up, and then it's, well, I still love them. I don't know what particular behavior you're talking about, maybe, but
Anything. I mean, I don't know.
yeah.
Anything.
So then it just causes people maybe to bring up excuses as to why they do still love them, but why they're acting a certain way towards them. But if it's just
Mhm.
mean spirited stuff, like if it's just mean spirited and it's obviously hateful, like that doesn't align with
Right.
anything in scripture.
Hmm.
So I don't know how a Christian could justify some of that, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a fly still going around me here. I'm trying to get him.
No, I had one too, or something. It was something, or maybe
A
his
little
piece of
gnat.
dust,
I'm
something
like,
around.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
don't know if
No.
you have a specific example, it might make it a little bit easier for me to answer, but like a
Well,
specific way that a Christian was acting, or
no, I mean, I think that like sometimes, like, I hear a lot of just like, and I'm just talking like, social media type stuff. Like there just seems to be this like undercurrent of like, Christians are under attack. Christians are, you know, um, just so misunderstood. And then I think sometimes like the people who I see who are kind of like attacking people who are Christians, they're kind of being exposed to the behaviors I was just talking about.
yeah,
Like they're being, because that's not, when I think about, someone who I would consider like a true Christian, like, I think about, my grandpa. My grandpa was a pastor, and I mean, he was a wonderful person. He was so kind. He was so loving. He did not ever, you know, he didn't say hateful things. He didn't need to, I mean,
yeah.
he got his point across, in a very kind and loving and understanding and forgiving way. And, um, I'm like, well, there's, surely if people have such a bad taste in their mouth for Christianity, they're not being exposed to people like my grandpa or people like yourself,
Yeah.
which is why I think it's like, that's why I say that your perspective is important, because I think that there are people who have to kind of lead the charge to debunk that misconception that some people have who are being
Yeah.
exposed to, I don't know, maybe some people who are
Well,
just not I guess unsavory. I don't know how to say it.
well, and
Um,
the thing is there's probably there's some truth into everything that you said.
yeah.
And there's you know, every stereotype is rooted in a little bit of truth,
Hmm.
honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how it becomes a stereotype of
Sure.
something.
Yeah. Hmm.
So when an atheist puts a stereotype on all Christians because of their interaction with a few that were bad, well, their interaction with those few is still real. It's a
Yeah.
real interaction.
No, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So their viewpoint of Christianity is there's some truth to it. Now, but a lot of things, what it comes down to, I believe, not just Christianity, but a lot of things just comes down to there not being a total understanding. I've talked to some people, some people that are unbelievers, and and it has to do with there's someone that I'm been talking to recently that had just an absolutely horrible experience with a Christian family, and nothing about what they did would be supported by what we would say is Christianity. But that put a bad, just an instant like bad taste in their mouth, so to speak, about it, and there's trauma. There was even trauma attached to Christianity now.
Yeah.
And my message to them was, like, my heart broke for them that's how they were introduced to Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you just haven't been properly introduced to the gospel.
Yeah.
And that is not a representation of the gospel. And so unfortunately there are bad representations of and maybe you feel that way too about when she opened up that binder, and there was just pictures of people with Down syndrome, and this is what they look like. And now in hindsight, you're like, that's not a representation of people with Down syndrome.
Yeah, no,
it's
true.
Introduction,
Yeah, no, that's very true. And so, I mean, I think that's why, it's so important to, how do I want to say this? It's so important to, I guess, be the reason why somebody, well, in your case, like, the way that you conduct yourself, like, you could very well like make up for some of the negativity somebody's experienced. Like maybe that would make them realize like, hey, not everybody is like this.
Yeah.
Just like where, I mean, I feel like with Abel, and the reason why I share, at least in my, small, personal social media following, like our lives are great. Like, so people, it kind of like, I never say anything because again, I'm really careful and measured in what I say, but I have people tell me all the time, like, oh, it must be so hard for you guys. And it's like, no, our lives are actually pretty great. Like, he's so much fun. And like, that's what I want people to see. Because I think that a lot of times, like the reason why people think like, oh, I could never do it. Like I couldn't do what you do. Well, sure you could. I mean, you couldn't have like, a wonderful little 6-year-old, like who has like a ton of personality and a great sense of humor and
right.
is so sweet and affectionate. Like, why couldn't you? You know what I mean? So right. I just think that makes me, and maybe that's what I'm getting at. Like, I feel the need to really just like get out there and put myself out there to my circle and, a little bit beyond, just so that people can see like, this is not what you might think it is, know? And I think that's just so important,
Yeah.
And I think that you do that. I mean, I really do, because, that's another thing too, is that I feel like sometimes there are, and this could go for anything, Joel, it's not necessarily just like Christianity. It could be like political, whatever, it's like certain people feel like their group, whatever it is just like beyond reproach. So if you say, oh, I don't really like the way that person was behaving, like, oh, well, you're just attacking, this political leaning, or you're just attacking this religion. And it's like, right. No, I'm just saying that particular action is, not becoming of the message that, this person claims to want to be sending.
Right.
So I guess that's where it kind of comes down to like what you said though, like just not necessarily worrying about walking on eggshells, but just being compassionate in what you say and your approach, and
and being open to dialogue, being open to have these conversations and not being not just always being on the defense, right?
Right.
I mean, there is some truth to that Christianity is there is something about that is different about the way that people I don't know that it's necessarily, I mean, it is kind of under attack at times. And so there is some truth to that. But I actually just wrote about this to my I think I said it a little bit. I went live this morning in my Monday morning musings is what I call them.
Mhm.
And I think I'm going to share it. It was for my church family, but it was because I had this stirring about the reactions of the opening ceremony of the Olympics.
Mhm.
And it was really about showing the difference in reacting and responding. And because like when I had that episode with Ron, I didn't backtrack, or uh I didn't what's the word I'm looking for? I didn't forfeit any of my what I think is morally right.
Sure.
Like I'm not shy about it, or I didn't back down from it or anything like that.
Mhm.
I just
Yeah.
think there's a lot of lack of compassion though still in the way that we talk to people and present, the things that we believe.
Yeah.
So back to the Christianity being under attack, that was literally something that I pinpointed in it. And I might I don't know. I'll definitely share it with you if you want to read
Yeah,
it.
please. Yeah, I'd love that
I
actually.
don't know how to. Maybe I can just forward the email to you. It goes out in our weekly like church email that we have for our church family, and we call it a word of encouragement. Every week there's one that goes out, and
Oh, that's nice.
our senior pastor writes a lot of them, but then he has us. Sometimes I might write one like maybe once a month sometimes. So, but I'll just read you this one because it had some sting to it towards my brethren
Mhm.
and my Christian brothers and sisters. And so I said, all right, take a breath if you think that any of that was you, and hear me out. In my heart, I kept thinking, what good is this doing? What fruit is coming from this? Jesus told us all this would happen. Jesus said we would be hated because of him. When I chose Jesus, I chose the life that comes with following him. I chose to answer the call to be a pastor. And sometimes people, both my brethren and unbelievers, dishonor me or mock me. I am not a victim. I put it in all caps.
Mhm.
Therefore, I refuse to react as if I am. So
That's
there's
great.
there's truth to what some people are saying about being under attack, and that there's differences in the way that Christianity is openly mocked versus I mean there's truth that Muslims would never ever ever the Muslim religion would never be openly mocked in society, I guess. Like it would never happen the way that they think. We could go. That's the other thing is people start to argue about the semantics of was it mocking the Last Supper, was it something else, whatever. Like that stuff doesn't even matter to me. So there is some truth to that, but I'm not going to take on this victim status from it. Like I'm not going to be like, oh, well, everybody's picking on us Christians. Like, no,
Mhm.
I'm not. I'm not a victim. I'm not going to react that way because I
Mhm.
know that my mission is more important than me being right about those things. My mission in showing people who Jesus really is and presenting the truth of the gospel is more important than being able to say that I'm a victim and being on the right, like showing people like I'm right, you're wrong. Like
Mhm.
that's just the way I see it. And so I get
Yeah.
frustrated by some of the rhetoric that happens around
Yeah,
that.
that's a
Well,
really good mentality to have. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like, I mean, I feel the same way, even, in my, advocacy for, individuals with Down syndrome and disabilities. Like, I just think like I really have to be careful, like how I'm using my time,
yeah,
because I could go and like get in a bunch of fights with people online. I'm not saying I haven't left a couple spicy comments back to
yeah,
people before if they've said something really nasty.
right.
But it really like there are so many like there's so many better ways I can use my time. So I do agree with you there. I think that's really great what you wrote. I think that's again, see, this is why your perspective is important.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah,
Thank you.
people want to hear this stuff. So yeah, I think that's
So I don't know. We're getting low on time here. That there's like several. Oh yeah, because we're like right at
well,
one.
no, it's okay. I've got some more time than I thought I had. Remember, I thought I had that appointment, and no, I don't.
Well, it's like sometimes as I get talking with someone, there's like 10 questions that start to come up, and then
Yeah.
Then I lose the 10 questions because we're on something else, and then
No, it's okay. No.
there's like probably tons of things that things I'm leaving out that had come to me while you were talking, but and some of it had to do with that process of um, talking to the genetic counselor. And I guess one thing that surprises me is how you say that she was like kind of really almost pushing to terminate the pregnancy on a 40% chance.
Mhm.
Now, in hindsight, it was 100%, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
he was born that way.
Mhm.
But there must be, it just breaks my heart to think that there must be pregnancies that are being terminated and their children wouldn't, and for that reason of, like you said, being based in
Yeah,
fear.
that's their reason. Yeah, and then it didn't. Oh, I'm sure that does happen.
And not that there should, I don't think any of them should be, right? Like, I mean,
Sure.
I
Well,
mean,
I know. I see what
yeah.
you're saying, though. Somebody might make that decision simply based on that information, which is not explained correctly, or, because we really didn't know. I mean, 40% odds, it's pretty high. But we couldn't have known without an amnio, which that was also something, again, not my
That's a
OB.
more invasive test.
Yeah, and it would, there's a lot of risks involved with that, especially the later you are in your pregnancy. And so, that was another thing. Not my OB. My OB was totally cool with us not wanting to do that. Again, she's
Mhm.
awesome. But the genetic counselor, they really wanted me to do that too. And I said, I'm not interested. Because if it can mean I could have him early, and we're already may have some other stuff going on, I'm just, at this point, it would just be to satisfy curiosity, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, I guess I don't know if I have just like I have like a very like visual memory. Like I remember like where I was when I did things. I can just like still see it in my head. And I remember like sitting there on the couch, and it was like maybe a few days before he was born, which his birth was early. It was like not, it was 36 weeks, and we were not expecting it. Like literally labor was like an hour. And I remember Chris said to me, no, I said to him, I said, so do you think he's going to have Down syndrome? And he was like, I don't know. What do you think? And I said, I think I'm going to be more surprised if he doesn't. And I think the minute I knew in my heart that he was going to, I thought that he was going to have Down syndrome. So my mom has a sister who's like very spiritual. She is very like, like lots of prayer, and she had said, she knew, not a lot of people knew, because I didn't want to just like, I didn't know myself what was going to happen. So I didn't really share it with a lot of people about the possibilities, unless it was like family or like really close friends.
Yeah.
And so she knew that things had been, going on, and just that we'd had a lot of extra tests and things. So she was like praying for him a whole lot. And she told my mom that whenever she was praying for him, that she had never felt the presence of God so strong when she was praying for him. And when she said that, that's what made me feel that way. That's what made me feel like he probably did, because I really do feel, and I mean, I could just be biased, but I think a lot of parents have felt this way. Like if you look at him, and if you just like really just like look into his eyes, I mean, I swear, sometimes it feels like you're just almost like looking at somebody from another, I don't even know. Like it's just, it's so different. He's so pure. It's just, you just never experience anything like it, And I think that I remember telling somebody in the hospital, because he was in the NICU for 35 days. And they would have these cuddlers who would come in, and it's like they would cuddle the babies who's, parents, because we were there a lot, but we couldn't be there 24/7, because obviously I had to go back to work at some point, and we had another baby at home. And so we would go up there in the morning and in the evenings, and I'd stay real late at night. And there was a woman who was like an older woman who was there holding him when I came, and she started to get up and give him to me, but he was sleeping. And I said, you can just, I don't want to wake him up. You can just hold him. I'll just sit here with you till he wakes up. And so we're talking or whatever. And I said, because she was talking about, she knew somebody, growing up that had Down syndrome and stuff. And I said, I feel like he is so blessed in a way that I'm just not sure if he's ever going to feel some of the feelings not people with Down syndrome are they can every bit feel the same things we do. They can be mad,
I know
sad,
what
whatever.
you're saying,
But I don't know that, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe you don't, but like all of us have like those kind of very like unsavory feelings sometimes. I know I've had like really, really mean or just like, thoughts about people. Like if they say something I don't agree with or something, like
right.
I have some thoughts like that. I just don't know if he's really going to have that. I don't think he
Like
will.
his
I
life
think
experience is going to be way different.
his life
And it
experience,
may
and
not
that's a good way
necessarily
to put
be in a
it.
bad way, that
Yeah.
people would automatically assume it would be.
Yeah, I mean, he'll still get mad and sad and have all the full gamut of emotions that we have, but I don't know. There's like that thing inside of us all that is kind of like, I don't know if it's just like everyone has, everyone sins, or if everybody, everybody has like that little thing inside them that just like is maybe not our best moment. Like we aren't our best self, and I don't know. I just don't. I don't know that I'll have to experience that, and I kind of love that.
That's a cool perspective.
Yeah.
Do you guys now? This might be. I don't know. This might be a difficult question. Sometimes these difficult questions and come to me, and I'm like, I don't know if I should ask this.
Yeah, you can ask it.
Because it is out of a heart of curiosity. But
no, go ahead.
But is there anything about his future that you struggle with?
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, I think that I was, before I had kids, I will just say having kids in general, I would say I was like, I never really like feared death. It was just kind of like something that's like, yeah, it'll happen one day, kind of when it happens, it happens. But now I just kind of like feel compelled to like live forever, right? Because I don't want to contemplate a future without either of my kids.
Yeah.
And I don't want to contemplate a future where he doesn't have one of us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that he has Ella, but that's a lot to put on her. And I realize that that's something. Now, she always says, like, she's like, I always want Abel to be with me, and I always want to take care of Abel, and because she's at the age where she understands.
Yeah.
The gap has widened enough now to where she gets it, because he's really not that much younger than her, and so she says that, but she's young, and eventually she'll hopefully she marries somebody who's a good person, and
Sure.
there's just so much to think about in that regard. But I do worry about his future, because I don't really know, like,
actually, in some ways it's not. I'm seeing now that may not even be a fair question, because all parents probably think about their kids' futures.
Well, they do, right? But I will say I don't. Now, there are some things I would worry more about Ella than I would about Abel. Like, I would worry about, maybe her getting into like an abusive or bad relationship. I would worry about that for her. Or, maybe I wouldn't worry about that so much with him, because, obviously there'd be more oversight there. But, will she likely grow up and, have a good career and, be able to provide for herself and not have to worry about some of those things? Yeah, I think with him, I worry about maybe the wrong person crossing his path, taking advantage of him. Things like that. I mean, the worries are always going to be there, but they just are a different set of worries.
Well, yeah. And I guess maybe what I was thinking more towards about, though, in my mind is, and I think that it's bringing it back to maybe the perspective you shared about there being a blessing part of him experiencing life differently than we will experience it.
Mm-hmm.
I just was thinking, like, do you ever, does that perspective then that you shared, does that help you then not to have those feelings of like the things that he's going to miss out on?
I mean, that is kind of a struggle. I don't really know. I mean, I will say this. I have been exposed to a great number of people in the Down syndrome community, and I know that it is very possible for people with Down syndrome to live very full lives, have jobs, get married, having kids less likely. That is something that is a less likely thing, but can happen. So I think he'll still live a very full life. I think my concerns are more around. No, I do kind of worry sometimes. Like, I can tell that he really likes girls.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I hope that people are kind to him.
Yeah.
I think right now I'm just kind of really worried about bullying, to be honest with you, because he is about to start school.
Yeah.
And I am very concerned about that. It keeps me up at night. I mean, it makes me cry on my way home from work. Like, I mean, I think about that but then I think, Joel, like where there are kids who maybe just, are not the nicest for whatever reason, I have to believe that there will be kids who will stick up for him if they see that kind of stuff going on, because
Yeah.
I was one of those kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had a very big spot in my heart for, people, who do have disabilities. I've been that way since I was a kid. I would be the one who would, say something to somebody if they were being mean. Like, I just, so I know that there are people out there like that. And I just hope that, I really hope that, Abel encounters a lot of kids like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely raising my kids to be like that, because I wasn't that kid, because I grew up just with probably a lot of insecurities, that as long as the attention, and not that I was ever really bullied, but I always had the insecurity of like, I'll be bullied if the attention gets on me, that I was like, okay if the attention was on other people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, I never was actually bullied, but I always walked around as if I was going to be bullied. Like, it's a weird thing.
I mean, being a kid's hard. I mean, it really is. Yeah, I mean, so I totally get that. Now I will say, I don't know that I ever saw you picking on anybody ever, but I can't
It was
imagine you
more
picking
of
on Bree.
yeah, it was more of just being the sideline person, like,
yeah, maybe not
I was
speaking up.
never like guilty by, I could be guilty by association a few times, like, where I was the one standing kind of laughing or something like that. I could definitely, but yeah, but never, well, because for one, I was so, the insecurities were of me thinking that I would be bullied, and then also like, I was too insecure to bully someone else. Like,
yeah, no, that makes sense. But I love that you're teaching your kids that, and that,
well, and it's surrounded, it's built up in confidence.
it is.
Like, I'm building, that's what my focus is on, is being compassionate, being kind, and being confident. And when you're confident, when there's a confidence, and it's the confidence is about being rooted in Jesus. So obviously I'm giving a that being our foundation of our family, our Christian faith, and being confident in who they are in Jesus, and being confident in who God has made them to be in Jesus. And then out of that confidence, then will bring those other, it'll just be like fruit of that when they see someone being picked on, they're gonna be like, hey, that's not cool, like, don't pick on them, like, and they'll do it in a way too that may not necessarily be confrontational to the bully, but might help bring them all together, like, that's kind of how I, not that I don't want Riker to be the one that that steps in the way and then bops the bully in the face. It's more about let's do this in an assertive way that still shows the love of Jesus. So now I have to admit, I did tell Stevie last year, she came home and there was this boy in her class who was in trouble every single day. Like, every day she came home, it was an update on what he got in trouble with today, and and then the punishment. And so she comes home one day and she was like, Dad, so and so touched my butt today. And I was like, listen here, girl. I said, if he does that again, you can bop him right in the nose.
Well, I'm sure I tell Ella the same thing. Yeah, that's not cool.
And I said, nobody touches your butt, like, and I said, obviously, go tell the teacher and stuff. But I mean, I just straight up told her, like, bop him in the nose. It's okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, no, I mean, I totally feel you there. I mean, I've always told Ella, you'll never get in trouble by me if you're defending yourself or your brother.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's so important though. Like you said, I think it is a lot about confidence though, because Ella is an extremely confident kid. And, that's one of the things that they always tell me, like at parent teacher conferences, is that, because she and I did a lot of like role playing when it was time to go to school. So
Yeah.
I would say like, oh, like, what would you do if, your friends were, making fun of somebody, or said like, hey, that, they can't play with us, or, all the way down to like, hey, there's no adults around, but we want to go swimming. Like I always ask her those like what if situations and ask her what she would do. And it's funny because her teachers have sometimes quoted things back to me that like I've told her to say. So like sometimes like, the teacher said that, she'll stop and be like, you're not being very nice. Is that necessary? Like she'll say things like that, to other kids or whatever, but not in a confrontational way, really, just more like a matter of fact way. But she does not like people to be left out.
Yeah.
And, I don't either. And, now that being said, like I've always told her, like if someone's making you uncomfortable or if someone's not nice to you, you can just basically agree to like, hey, we're not all going to be like the best of friends, whatever. But, at the same time, we still need to be kind. So she's done really well with that, and I'm really proud of her. But, I'm sure, as you can imagine, like that message just gets really reinforced at our house, because she's always kind of known that Abel's a little bit different than other kids. And I mean, I remember we took her to the park last summer, and I want to say, I went first, and I just brought her to meet with her little girlfriends. And then Chris came up to the park later to bring Abel because it was real hot, and, he couldn't take the heat. He has really sensitive skin sometimes. And so he was just going to bring him for a little bit. So all the girls are playing and stuff. And then Chris gets out with Abel, and Abel comes walking over, and I can kind of see the girls, and they're kind of looking at him, and they're sort of, apprehensive. And Ella just walks up and she's like, so this is my brother. He's really great. You will like him. Like she didn't even say it like, you'll like him. She was like, no, it's not an option. You will like him.
It's mandatory. Yeah.
Yeah, you will like him. And so, and then her friends are like, oh, okay. And so then they're all just, playing with him and stuff. But she's very big on like, including him and things like that. And like,
That's cool.
like, so that it is nice. And that being said, like, she does her own thing sometimes. Like if she has a friend or whatever, they can go upstairs and play in their room. It's not like, but then if they come down and play with him and stuff, that's always really nice. And I think it's good for a lot of those kids. Like Abel really is their only exposure to a child with a disability right now.
Yeah.
Because Ella goes to a private school, so there's really, it's even more siloed, as a downside.
Sure. They definitely don't have the resources probably to.
They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked into sending him there, and it was just, I think they were willing to. Well, I know they were willing to try, but I think I held on to that hope for like till the very end, and then I thought, I mean. It's a problem if Ella doesn't raise her hand before she speaks. So I can only imagine like him walking around just like,
right,
blowing things off of the table. And,
right.
He's just not, he still has a lot of like things like that. You know what I mean? He's dealing with. So, I mean, it's just, he's very well behaved, but, sometimes like if he's done with something, he'll just throw it on the floor, I mean, just things you wouldn't expect a 5 or 6 year old to do necessarily. It's more like on the level of like 2 to 3 years old.
So is that like, is that something common where that is the linear progression, but instead of, so the way I just kind of it just popped in my head then is, so maybe you see maybe a I don't even know how I want to word it, a non Down syndrome child, their linear progression might look like this, where someone like Abel is their linear progression, like they're still progressed, but it's just
it goes a lot slower, in my experience. And but also there are some things that he is really strong in. Like he's really good with like puzzles and fitting things together. And he's always really excelled at like counting, alphabet, anything that's like repetition. He tends to do really well with.
Memorization.
Memorization is big for him. I mean, he has these little songs he listens to on his tablet. he has every single, he can sit there and, sing the lyrics and, what he can, but he'll say enough to where, like he knows what's coming.
Yeah.
And, he definitely has a lot of really cool strengths. And then, there's going to be obvious like delays and things like that. Like we just went through the IEP process, which I know that can be really challenging for parents because, it's kind of all your child's challenges laid out before you. I mean, the strengths are there too, but it more so focuses on what they need help with, right? Because that's the whole point. And I've just always been of the mindset, like it does not do me any good to deny the areas that he needs help in. Like I'm not doing him any kind of service at all. It's not embarrassing to me. I agreed with, their assessment of him and his strengths and his, as I call them, areas of opportunity, which I think we all have.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, I don't get offended, and I've had some different professionals say like, thank you. You've been so gracious through this, because I do think that parents can sometimes get really like offended, or it's very hurtful because, I mean, during his IEP process, I would say there were things that maybe like, I think Chris commented like he definitely didn't have his best showing there. I mean, he's definitely capable of more than that.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's like, that's true. But, let's
That'll all
get
come
him.
out with time,
It'll come out with time and his comfort level with people. And I'm just not, I mean, I don't know. I think he, if he needs help with something, who am I to, bury my head in the sand and say, oh no, he doesn't have any issues with that when I know it's not true. Yeah, it's just who he is. I'm not ashamed or embarrassed about it or anything. He'll get there.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at then was not that there won't be milestones that he won't reach, but that they just will take longer to get to those milestones maybe.
It's true. And they don't. So that's one thing that's kind of interesting. So I guess like everybody's kind of different, but generally, like when you go to the pediatrician with your young child and they'll say like, oh, they should be rolling over. They should be saying this many words. They should be doing this.
Right.
They don't do any of that because he would more so have us lead the conversation. Like, what's he doing? Do you have any concerns? But we never got that information like we did with Ella, like this is what she should be doing. It was more like them asking us, what is he doing? And so he's actually been a part of a really cool research study with Cincinnati Children's that has spanned 3 years. And they observe him, like there's like psychologists involved and things like that. And what they're trying to do is develop some milestones to kind of give people a more accurate idea of maybe those milestones. Although I think it's great research and I think it's valuable, but it's so hard because every child's different, right? Typical or not. So, I mean, I guess they're just looking for general, like seeing if they can see patterns or consistencies.
Right.
But to me, I've just always like tried not to compare my kids because like, I've always said like, with us, it's kind of like we've had sort of one extreme or the other. Like Ella was very early to do everything. I mean, she was speaking in full sentences before she was 2 years old. Reading we barely even had to teach her to read. I don't even really know what happened. I was really worried about like, how do you teach a kid to read? I mean, I don't even know, like, how do you do that? And it was weird. She just learned. I don't even know. I mean, I said something to her kindergarten teacher and I was like, wow, thank you for all the work you've been doing. And she's like, we really haven't done anything with that yet. She's just kind of picking up on it. So we really didn't even have to try that hard with her. Whereas with Abel, I would say things are just a lot more intentional, like
That's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Is like, do you have like, then it's instead of like, oh, this is a milestone that we want to reach. It's okay. This is a challenge that he is experiencing. Let's address this challenge now. And towards improving that.
It's very intentional, like down to, show him to hold the sandwich with both hands. I mean, just like modeling that and showing him, or he's very used to us saying like, here, let me take your hands and show you how to hold this or something like that. And he is, I mean, once you show him, I mean, a lot of times you don't really need to show him again. But sometimes you do. But I would just say it's more intentional for us. Whereas with Ella, it was just sort of like, she was just a natural with so many things and just never she really hasn't, I mean, academic challenges, she really has never had any.
Yeah.
She's really ahead of the curve. She's great at, she's like one of those kids. I mean, I don't know where she got it from, not me. She's just good at every subject. I mean, she's strong in math and science and reading. I mean, she just doesn't have any kind of anything like that. And then, you know, with Abel, I just know everything is going to be just more of a tailored to him process. You know, we're going to have to be a lot more intentional, and
Yeah.
that's okay, you know. But
Yeah.
it's just been very interesting from a parenting perspective, because it's like, yeah, we've definitely had both extremes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
No, that makes perfect sense, though. All of that does, and because that's kind of what I was wondering in my mind too, when I was thinking about it just now, was that intentionality, and you I think you described it perfectly as I was like thinking about it. And so then, you know, maybe because I also was thinking about, I also visualized like ages, because you said that he just turned 6, but maybe some of his mannerisms are like a 2 or 3-year-old. And
Mm-hmm.
so like then does that, not that this is like something that you shoot for, I guess, like we've already kind of established the intentionality behind it, but like at 12, then when he's 12, maybe he's, you know, up to like 7 or 8. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense? Like, is that kind of
Yeah,
how
I think
people see things sometimes?
so. Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, it's just, it's very different, because like some things I would put him in line, you know, with other 6-year-olds. I mean, in fact, when it comes to like emotional intelligence, I'd put him higher than the age of 6.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, he's very emotionally intelligent. He can very much pick up on people's emotions. He's very conscious, I can tell, of how he's making people feel. You know, but then there are some things where I think, like, you know, when he's 12, like, you know, he may be more on the level of like a, you know, 7 or 8-year-old when it comes to like math or reading or something. You know, I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But yeah, I think that's typically like, I forget, someone told me once, like, and I think that it's probably evident like with Ella seeing it, because when he was younger and we would explain to Ella like he has Down syndrome, she'd be like, well, there's nothing different about him, you know.
Mm.
And then now as he gets older, differences are becoming more evident.
Mm.
So yeah, and they'll probably continue to become more evident, you know, as they get older. But she's pretty well aware of it now. Although I do have a funny story. So this was during COVID. So let me think. So Ella would have been, so that was 2020. So Abel would have been 2. So Ella would have been about 3 or 4. And we're outside in the backyard, and one of the kids had asked a question about Abel. I think it was, oh yeah, he had come over to the fence and he was kind of babbling. And they were like, I can't understand what he's saying. Like, what is he saying? And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. She's like, he just has COVID. And I kind of just saw, I kind of saw the dad, like, kind of like, what?
Like
And he
what?
kind of was like, and I was like, oh my gosh, no. I was like, Ella, he doesn't have COVID. I was like, I was like, she means he has Down syndrome. So for a while there during COVID, because that's all you heard about,
Right.
he would tell people sometimes like,
Thought
oh,
he had
he just
COVID.
my brother has COVID.
Yeah, no big deal.
So like, and that was when it was not a good time to say that, because like
Right.
everyone was like, you know, freaking out. I mean, it's still never a good time, but like especially then. So it's like we had to kind of wrangle that in, because she was like telling
Yeah.
everybody he had COVID.
That's funny. That is a good story.
Yeah.
Well, we'll unplug with that story.
Okay.
Because like I said, I could probably keep going.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other things that come up, but no, I think this was great. I appreciate you giving the time, and I definitely
Yeah.
would love to have you back on again. And
Yeah.
you know,
I'll
I
have to
think
use
that,
my laptop next time.
okay, yeah, it
Yeah.
might help with the
Yeah. The
with
visuals.
the picture maybe.
I should have just turned it on like, you know, black or something. But yeah, just like black screen. But yeah, I think this has been great. It's been really, really great. And
Good.
yeah, and
Yeah,
and again, like, I think you should definitely keep doing this.
well,
I
thank
think
you
your
for the
perspective is
encouragement.
valued, and I really think that, you know, you are a voice that's needed out there. I think that you can probably make a difference in a lot of people's lives, in a lot of ways they feel about things. And
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
yeah, I mean,
And in your face, Alex. She wasn't just saying it to be polite. So
No, I wasn't. I really try not to, I am polite, but I try not to give anybody fake compliments.
yeah.
So
I also think it would be cool to. I was thinking about this, especially with some of the stuff that's been happening recently with the Olympics and all that stuff. Is if you're willing, I think it would be cool when stuff like this stuff happens. Like we jump on here and maybe go live or something, and we kind of hash it out together.
Oh yeah, I'd like that because I had opinions about that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
So I think that would be fun if you're willing to do that.
And I may have somebody interesting for you to consider bringing on if she will. So I'll tell you who that is. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, anybody that's I'm open. Like if I'm willing to have my own troll on, I'm pretty much willing to have anybody on. So
yeah. No, I can't wait for that episode. I hope that's coming soon.
So we've gone back and forth a little bit. I kind of put him on the back burner for a little while. I had to really, really decide, like, okay, am I really going to have him on? Like, because I don't know exactly how the episode's going to go. He is someone that I think I surprise him because he's used to trolling, I think, Christians and pastors and things and probably getting different reactions from them. And he told me one time that he liked talking to me, that he actually liked it. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if he really is my troll. And to wrap this up, I guess too, it's funny that we're ending on Alex, but when you had said that people that don't interact with your like other posts, only, there have been times when he, will say something on a random post that's, kind or, so that's why I'm kind of like,
oh, you might be friends.
Is he a troll? Are we friends?
Yeah.
Like, what? I don't know. So we'll see.
No, I like that. Is he my troll or are we friends? I think that's really that's the question of the hour.
That might be the episode title. Yeah. That might be the episode title, not the thumbnail. Be something like that. So,
but yes, I'm very down to discuss anything like that. So your idea. So just let me know.
Okay.
And So, well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. You too. Just hold on 1 second. Okay, sure. I'll sign off, and then we can just have like 1 minute afterwards. Like it'll stop recording, and then we can talk in the studio. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. So, anyways, thank you again.
Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed this. Definitely interact, leave comments. I guess I'm supposed to say like and share. That's like the YouTube thing to say. It does, I guess, help the channel out. So if you did like this, if you do like what we're doing here or what I'm doing here, do that, like it, share it. It gets the algorithm, gets us out in front of more people, I think. And that's our 2 cents on some of that stuff. And love y'all. Bye-bye.